very special, a special evening at CSEP with Deputy Secretary of State Richard Verma. We are honored to have you with us. You're a highly distinguished individual who has made memorable and transformative contributions to India-US relationships. In your tenure as the ambassador to the United States to India, he witnessed a lot of changes in India and in the Indo-US relations. A decade since, the world is witnessing various tides of environmental, economic, and geopolitical uncertainty. Researchers at CSEP have been examining many issues related to climate change and sustainability and its challenges, such as energy transition, the macroeconomics of climate change, and critical minerals, to name a few. Our Foreign Policy and Security Studies vertical has been focusing on regional connectivity on South Asia, triangular cooperation in climate and development, Indo-Africa ties, and China's role in the subcontinent. Our Growth and Development team conducts evidence-based policy research on urban policy, health, and education policy. We will be grateful if you could share your insights and understanding on various aspects of Indo-US relations, including traditional issues of geopolitical competition and emerging areas like climate, technology, and development. I will now take a minute to introduce the fascinating career of Secretary Richard Verma. Dr. Richard Verma currently serves as the United States Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. In his long and distinguished career in public service and the private sector, he has held many positions of responsibility, including a veteran of the United States Air Force and a recipient of numerous military awards and civilian decorations, U.S. Ambassador to India 2014 to 2017, Chief Legal Officer and Head of Global Public Policy for MasterCard, Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs, Vice Chairman of the Asia Group, a global consulting firm. He also holds a PhD from Georgetown University and a law degree, a JD, from American University. I now hand over to Deputy Secretary Verma for his address, followed by a conversation and Q&A by Senior Fellow Constantino Xavier.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. It's a very, very kind introduction, and I appreciate so many of you coming out this evening to hear a talk, but I look forward to engaging with all of you, and there's many of you in this room who I've learned so much from. So it's good to have this opportunity to be up here, but really I share this stage with all of you. And I appreciate the kind introduction and for having me here to share a few thoughts on the U.S. India partnership, because I do think it's a good time to take stock of where we have been, where we are today, and where we are going. And let me say up front how grateful I am for CSEP's leadership and scholarship in so many areas, but especially in the fields of economics, energy, technology, health, and of course, foreign policy. You know, governments can only do so much, but great organizations like CSEP provide the innovative ideas to solving vexing policy questions. So please keep up the great work, all of us serving in government, whether we are in Washington, D.C. or Delhi. Count on CSEP. We count on your fellow civil society and academic colleagues to debate and analyze and generate the public policies for the future. And for that, we say thank you, and we are very grateful. And while I know you have been independent from the Brookings Institution for some 4 years, let me say a word of thanks to the Brookings pioneers like Strobe Talbot, Tanvi Madan, and Martin Indyk, who so strongly supported the establishment of a separate research institution here in India. And to Martin in particular, on his recent passing, we say a special word of thanks for his lifetime of service and impact. He was a towering figure, and he will be missed. I've been in this role as Deputy Secretary of State for Management for nearly a year and a half. It's been a great honor to be back in the department after last having served as ambassador here in Delhi. In these past 18 months, I've been to over 50 of our embassies and consulates and to dozens of countries. I've seen a world that often seems filled with an unlimited set of challenges. From Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, a Middle East reeling from the terrorist attacks of October 7th, and now the prospects for broader regional conflict, a global competition with China, and too many transnational threats like climate change, health, food, and energy insecurity, democratic retrenchment, and cyber intrusions and online surveillance, misinformation, and harassment. There's no question these challenges can feel overwhelming and like we're losing ground. But let me also say, in these 50 plus stops I've made, I've also seen enormous progress. I've seen innovation and I've seen courage. Nearly 60% of the world have voted or will vote this year in democratic elections, including here in India. And I understand there's an election coming up in the United States. More people are living longer, and around the world, development indicators are moving in the right direction. And I know this progress can be hard to see sometimes, especially when we are bombarded by the bad or salacious news on social media and the TV channels. But maybe I can bring it closer to home for all of you and focus on this partnership in particular, a partnership that I would argue has brought greater peace and stability to the world over the past 2 decades. This was exactly the initial theory of the case as to why our 2 countries should be closer partners. In fact, it was President Eisenhower in 1959 here in New Delhi, in commemorating the U.S. Embassy, who predicted that when young Americans and young Indians come together, the future would be brighter and bring a greater measure of happiness to the world. It was then Senator Kennedy, also in 1959, who said we needed to deepen our cooperation with India because, quote, the hinge of fate in Asia rests with India. It was then Senator Biden, the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, who said in 2006 that, quote, the pillars upon which security for the world will be built in the 21st century are India and the United States, and that his, quote, dream is that in 2020, the 2 closest nations in the world will be India and the United States, and if that occurs, the world will be safer. And it was Prime Minister Modi just last year, when addressing a joint session of the U.S. Congress, who said that he was, quote, here to speak about our calling for this century, the United States and India, and proclaimed that together we shall give a better future to the world and a better world to the future. You can see these are lofty ambitions from our leaders over decades. You also know that we were actually out of touch for many years. The mid to later years of the Cold War left us charting our own independent courses, if not estranged, but we lost time as well. But thankfully, for nearly 25 years, we have realized ever more ambitious gains, including many achievements that would have been simply unthinkable just a few years ago. So let me do 2 things with you today briefly. The first is just to recount the progress on the bilateral front. We shouldn't take for granted the gains that have been made, especially in these past few years. And second, let me give you some examples of how we are doing what both President Biden and Prime Minister Modi called for, and that is having a real and measurable positive impact on the global community in so many areas. But first, the progress in our ties. Ambassador Garcetti rightfully has framed our progress around the 4 Ps: peace, prosperity, planet, and people. It's a brilliant formulation, so let me not deviate from it. On peace and security, we have become integrated, trusted, and confident security partners. We've moved from sales to co-production and development of the world's most sophisticated systems. In fact, our hope is that through our expanded co-production relationship, India's defense industry will become an additional and sorely needed manufacturing hub to supply partner militaries, including our own. There is no other nation in the world designated as a, quote, major defense partner of the United States. But India is such a partner, and the special status carries important significance in the sophistication of our defense trade and our exercises. For someone who has been to nearly every U.S. India military exercise, I assure you that our two great militaries are well positioned for the future. And I look forward to hearing great things about the next iteration of our joint exercise, U.S, taking place in Rajasthan next month, when 600 U.S. soldiers from the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska will exercise alongside their brothers and sisters from the Indian Army. An example of convergence that our predecessors decades ago could hardly have imagined. But the security enhancements not only come from our military, they come from our diplomatic power and our diplomatic convergence as well. Our shared vision for the Indo-Pacific has brought us closer and helped reinforce the post-war order and norms grounded on democracy, the rule of law, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Our new architectures for cooperation, chief among them the Quad, has brought greater certainty and clarity to the frameworks for cooperation, and indeed a sense of optimism for the future. Despite initial skepticism from some corners, the Quad has evolved into a leaders-level organization forming a new pillar of Indo-Pacific architecture. When like-minded nations come together, as they have in the Quad, to deliver greater peace and prosperity, maritime security, and to battle climate change and so much more, our citizens are empowered and they are more secure, and this bodes well for the future. Our economic prosperity is strong and growing in many ways, but we are at the early stages of trade and economic convergence. And while $200 billion in two-way trade is a big number and some 10 times larger than what it was just 20 years ago, we can do more and we can do better. But again, the economic prosperity results not just from sales, but from joint research, joint exploration, innovation, and scientific discovery and collaboration. And this is where our natural affinities across industry and academia are having a real impact on the lives of our people. And as our governments seek to continue to break down historic barriers, so much more can and will be done in this category in the years ahead. On protecting the planet and battling climate change, we have found how much can be achieved when India and the United States work together. While we are two of the largest emitters in the world, we've also partnered to address the climate crisis and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement by launching the U.S. India Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership. Last year, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi announced plans to cooperate on rolling out 10,000 e-buses in India. And tomorrow, I'm delighted to be joined by John Podesta, the President's Senior Advisor on Climate and Clean Energy, and Dave Turk, the Deputy Secretary of Energy, for a full day of engagements with government, business, and civil society leaders to see how we can take our climate and clean energy work to the next level. In people-to-people ties, America boasts well over 4 million Americans of Indian descent, and Indian immigrants to the United States constitute the second largest category of U.S. citizens, and we are seeing cooperation in nearly every area. Take, for example, our recent successes with sports. Sports and deep pride in the achievement of our athletes continues to unite our countries. It was an honor for the United States to co-host the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, and we cheered on both our teams and celebrated India's thrilling championship win. And I was so glad to see that the Men's T20 World Cup marked yet another milestone for our relationship. When the Amul girl toasts the United States as the co-host of the Cup, as she did across India's newspapers this spring, we really feel like we have become part of the family. The patriotism and dedication of our athletes that inspires us all forms yet one more close bond between our people. I know it was this close bond that inspired the dedicated advocacy of then Mayor and now Ambassador Garcetti in his successful campaign to restore cricket to the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. And who knows, we may even see the Summer Olympics hosted right here in India in 2036. And the deepening of the people-to-people ties is only getting stronger. Last year, around 1.3 million visas were issued to Indians. That was a record. In 1963, my dad was one of those aspiring visa applicants. As he tells me, he's so nervous when he was going through the process and also so excited about the future that lay ahead. My father would go on to get his master's, PhD, and teach in the United States for 43 years at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. My father passed away in March of this year, which was also a moment of real sadness for our family. But we've also taken these past few months to celebrate his life and recall the huge impact he had on his thousands of students in the books that he published, in helping to bring South Asian literature to the United States. This is what the U.S. and India relationship is built upon. The courage and determination of millions who have set out to build stronger ties through their work and enormous contributions. My dad's story is a familiar one in the larger U.S. India story. We are so grateful to all those who have helped build up this partnership over so many years. So on any objective scale, we have done well. Very well. But we cannot rest on these successes. We can't assume they will continue. And we also have to now focus, again, on what President Biden and Prime Minister Modi said about delivering for the world. When I was serving as ambassador, I recall so clearly what President Obama and the Prime Minister used to tell us, which was that the real measure of success in the relationship was not what we would do for each other, but what we were doing for others in the world. And on this measurement, I am proud to report on our success. And this is where I would say the real promise of the relationship lies. Let me give you 4 brief examples in health, space, advanced technologies, and climate change. First, in health. Together, our countries are making important progress in the fight against cancer. The United States was pleased to partner with IIT Mumbai and Tata Memorial in the development of an indigenous CAR T-cell gene therapy for cancer. As President Murmu stated in announcing this important achievement, the launch of India's first indigenous gene therapy, quote, provides a new hope for the whole of humankind. We were glad to be a part of this initiative that will save lives in India and around the world. The collaboration combines strengths in affordable drug manufacturing and expertise in medical innovation, making this new CAR T-cell therapy available at a fraction of the original cost, reducing it by nearly 1/10. I was also pleased that 2018 Nobel laureate for medicine, Dr. Jim Allison from MD Anderson University of Texas, recently visited India to deliver the inaugural U.S. India lecture on cancer, highlighting even more potential for significant advancements in cancer research and treatment. And when they met in June 2022, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi committed together to, quote, end cancer as we know it. These developments highlight that we are in this fight together, and our efforts are already saving lives. And I highlight the cancer work as just one example of our work in global health and global health security that spans the globe. Second, let me just mention again one example in advanced technologies. Our cooperation within the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technology, or ICET, as it's known, and our partnership in the Mineral Security Partnership represents an important investment in the future of our economies and our shared security. We are building trusted networks that will secure the supply chains for minerals essential to the development of next generation technologies and cooperating in the development and governance of those technologies themselves. Our joint efforts, underpinned by shared principles of openness and transparency, will ensure that the technology solutions will connect rather than oppress and control future generations of our citizens and those around the world. And even during the short time that we've been collaborating in these areas, we've seen incredible progress. Perhaps one particularly inspiring example is the investment of up to $825 million by U.S. firm Micron in a semiconductor packaging unit in Gujarat, strongly supported by efforts by both our governments under ICET. I understand that the first India-made semiconductor chips may begin to arrive in markets next year. This important investment is the first step in the creation of a semiconductor ecosystem in India that has the potential to transform its economy. It was only a few years ago that many industry analysts predicted that a semiconductor industry could never take hold here in India. Not only have our joint efforts and the vision of firms such as Micron proven them wrong, but our shared commitment to strategic technology cooperation has created hundreds of jobs in India and in related industries in the United States and is poised to create far more. Space. No area of our shared cooperation captures the imagination of our young people more than the final frontier of space. We have spent years working together on missions like the Mars Orbiter and NISAR. At the beginning of this month, NASA head Bill Nelson welcomed the arrival in the United States of ISRO astronauts, Group Captain Shukla and Group Captain Balakrishna Nair, who were appointed by ISRO to take part in the joint U.S. India mission to the ISS. Both these Gaganyatris began training for the mission in the United States this month, a mission that will advance scientific research, helping improve lives here on Earth and advancing our shared leadership in space exploration as we look towards new missions to the Moon and Mars. I can't think of a more potent symbol of the depth of our relationship than American and Indian astronauts together looking down on our planet from orbit. I'd like to highlight the visionary leadership of ISRO Chairman Dr. S. Somanath, whose vision made this breathtaking step forward possible. And of course, we are indebted to pioneers like Sunita Williams, who at this very moment continues to inspire us with her bravery. I know all of you join me in praying for her safe return to Earth and the continuation of her work that has inspired so many young people in both of our countries. And finally, on climate. As in the technology sector, our governments had long worried that our strategic competitors held many of the most important cards in clean energy, such as the production of solar panels. In January of this year, the United States Development Finance Corporation provided a $500 million loan to U.S. firm First Solar to support the establishment of a new solar panel manufacturing facility in Tamil Nadu. This investment of U.S. taxpayer dollars to pioneer the birth of a new strategic industry in India will not only begin to free both of our countries from a dependence on China for the components critical to our climate goals, but will also mark an important step in U.S. cooperation with the Prime Minister's Make in India initiative that will support the creation of high-quality jobs in both of our countries. As the production of solar panels comes online, In South India, we may be witnessing the first chapter in India's role as the supplier of renewable energy technology to our partners in the region and beyond. So, for nearly 25 years, there have been many bilateral gains and, yes, a global impact too. And as I mentioned, we are just at the beginning of that scope and scale of work together. And of course, we don't agree on every issue. And we will have divergent positions from time to time, but that is to be expected from two robust democracies. And we have important pressing work to do together to protect and strengthen our democracies, to ensure that all voices are heard and respected, that our work on women's empowerment and safety continues, and so much more. I'm confident that so long as we stay true to our underlying shared values and deep people-to-people ties, the future will remain bright. It is exactly why President Biden and Vice President Harris have called this relationship the defining partnership of the 21st century. They are right, and I am so optimistic about our future together. I look forward to your questions, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for letting me give a long speech.
No, not long at all. We're talking about scope and depth. I think you covered that
Well, you know,
very well.
I will say sometimes we don't build the record. We do a lot of things together. We don't often pause to remind people what we are actually doing, to set the record kind of straight. And people can disagree, obviously, with what we are saying, but I go back and look at those speeches of Eisenhower, Kennedy. I look at the National Security Council documents of what our country was talking about, and those are critically important materials for the historical record. So opportunities like this, I greatly appreciate the chance to at least lay out what we think about what we've done. And again, all of you may have different ideas on how it's gone and what we're up to, but again, thank you for allowing us to do that.
You find fertile ground here, a lot of historians and friends of U.S. India diplomatic history. I was thinking of the roads that the U.S. and India built together in Nepal in the 1950s, of the jets that the U.S. and India built together in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And then I think what you call lost generation, 60s to 90s, things tanked a little bit. And now this tour de force you gave us for the last 25 years, what has been achieved, a lot of it under your leadership here as a U.S. ambassador in Delhi. I have a tough job. I have 25 minutes to engage in a conversation and get questions from the audience. I think we have a few hundred people online, many distinguished people here in the room.
Yeah.
So, Rich, if you allow me, let's get the really easy part out of the way.
Good.
Russia, Bangladesh,
Oh,
democracy. And then we'll tackle what I think you define are really
I think I might have to go now. Yeah.
the drivers of the relationship.
Right.
Two areas in which we work a lot here, climate and tech. I think that's you really laid out why those are maybe the enablers of what you call the promise of the relationship. We can go a bit at length into that.
Yeah.
But firstly, I think you've just been appointed the special representative for Ukraine's economic recovery 2 weeks ago, I believe. And
I've taken on the duties of the special envoy, but she has a great team, and we're grateful for all that Secretary Pritzker did in her capacity.
So that'll add surely to your travel schedule over the next few months.
Yes.
But as you know, in Delhi, there's a great expectation. Prime Minister Modi is on his way to Kiev as we speak, or in Poland and in Kiev. a visit that many think is too late, I believe, in the US. But what is your sort of expectation about India's role in the Ukraine of a particularly economic recovery? But we spoke about peace and security too. What is that Indian role that you would welcome over there?
Yeah. So look, I'm delighted about this visit, and I think it's an important visit. Obviously, Poland and Ukraine. I think what we've witnessed over the last 2+ years is really an attempt by Russia to destabilize the global order, to upend the post-World War system, to have a country with a big military come across the border, take territory, if not proceed further into the country, and think that the world community would not respond. And I think what we've seen is exactly the opposite, a real coming together of the global community to stand against that kind of attack and unlawful invasion. And frankly, the targeting of civilians, the killing of children in hospitals, it's just been I think it's been terrible from many different respects. And I've been glad to see, again, the strength of the international alliance that's come together to support Ukraine in its efforts to defend itself. And so I think that's the important piece here, is to try to protect and preserve the international order. We understand India's long relationship with Russia, and India has to make its own determinations about where it wants to be on this scale. And I've appreciated some of the things the Prime Minister has said about this is not a time for war, this is a time for peace. But this is a very consequential period for the defense of liberty, freedom, the rule of law. Next,
The 8th largest country of the world, Bangladesh.
yeah.
I work on this area a lot in the neighborhood. We've been arguing that India needs to do more work with partners, the US, Japan, to deliver on what is called the connectivity deficit in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
The last 15 years have been quite good for India-Bangladesh relations. But I mean, if you listen these days to the Indian media and the analysts out there, we're hearing a lot about the American hand, the US coming to get us, the US undermining Indian interests in the neighborhood. You're coming from Kathmandu, where I think the US has put in around $500-600 million into an electricity grid connectivity project with India. Sri Lanka, the DFC, I think, has put in $500 million into a port built by an Indian company. What's the future you see for US India in the region post Bangladesh, or maybe in Bangladesh?
Look, again, I've been very proud to be able to get to Nepal and Maldives and Sri Lanka and seeing the incredible not just diplomatic investment and security training, but also the economic investment to create real opportunities and real jobs for people. The Millennium Challenge Corporation effort in Nepal, $500 million project. It'll deliver sources of clean energy to people who have never had reliable sources of energy. It'll build roadways and transportation networks that have never been present before. The Development Finance Corporation investment in Sri Lanka will provide an unprecedented kind of new commercial port opportunity that is built on terms that are fair, that are transparent, and that are sound, unlike some of the other players in the region that come in and create a huge debt trap for countries. So we're very proud of that work. Again, in Maldives, I was very proud to go, and we have a new embassy that we're opening there, and a new ambassador who has taken charge. So again, an important relationship for us. And in Bangladesh, obviously, we're very supportive of what kind of a democratic, peaceful kind of process here. It's been a very difficult situation for the people there over the last few months. I'm not going to get into all the misinformation and disinformation that's out there on social media. I'll just say again, when I look at the kind of important role we've provided in supporting the people of Bangladesh with hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and assistance to people who are, need the help. I'm very proud of the work that we've done there. Very proud of the work that we've done in partnership with the people there. And again, we will be supportive of this transition as it plays out.
Is it more difficult to sell the US these days in Asia? Has it become easier because of China, because of Russia, because of internal developments and politics in the US? What's your sense? Have you seen this region over and over? I mean,
Yeah, look, I don't think I guess I don't think about it as going out to sell the US. I think when I travel, and again, I've traveled widely throughout Indo-Pacific and across the world, we are talking about partnerships with countries to preserve and protect a set of ideas and philosophies and concepts, chief among them democracy, the rule of law, the peaceful resolution of disputes, a system of partnership, trade and free and fair and open and trade, commercial markets, civilian control of the military. I mean, these are principles that have emerged over decades. That is what we are standing up for. And that is what people yearn for. That is what I have seen. If people are given a chance to freely express themselves, that's what they are calling for and yearning for. And I think that is what our work is about. When I think about our Indo-Pacific strategy, of which India is such an important partner, critical partner, it's based on those shared values that I just mentioned. So again, it's not about selling the United States, but again, I'm very proud of President Biden and Vice President Harris's record over the last 3.5 years, and it standing up for ordinary people, standing up for democracy, standing up for the rule of law, standing up for openness and transparency. I think those are principles that again bring the U.S. and India closer together.
So reminding me on rule of law, values you mentioned, the big D word, democracy.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Vajpayee, 98 in New York, I believe, when he went on his visit, calling the US and India natural allies. We'll remember that phrase and how that picked off. And one of the reasons was democracy. But how do you explain to people these days that democracy matters really in the US in a relationship? I mean, the US has had great relationship with a one-party state. China for decades, with Pakistan. India has had its friends in Russia. But does it really matter still? Are these still natural allies?
Oh, of course it matters. I think you've just grouped together a number of countries that I would say we have very different relationships with. Look, we go back to our two constitutions. I've said this many times here in India, with the fact that our two constitutions start with the same three words, we the people. We have a different kind of connection. And again, you see it over the years. This is a special relationship. There are very few relationships like this that we have in the global community. And so it absolutely matters. And what we don't want is to lose sight of those values so that this becomes a transactional relationship, a buyer-seller relationship, call us when you need us relationship. We have to be together during tough times and good times. And in many parts of the world, these are tough times. And we can't cede the ground to authoritarianism. We can't lose the progress that we've made over these many years. And it is a struggle that has to continue. And it's not one day you say, okay, the game's over, we've won. This is a journey that continues over many years. And I just, again, you mentioned our country, you mentioned the United States. We've been at this for 250 years. And as the president reminds us, this is a journey that continues. Our democracy is imperfect in many ways, but we are trying to form that more perfect union. And so we come at this with a degree of humility. We come at this with a degree of modesty, and we come at this with an understanding of how hard this can be. But that also, what is the alternative? You know, we see what happens.
There's a pretty big one northwards from here.
We see what happens, right? In when you lose the ability, when people lose the ability to speak out, when people lose the ability to cast a vote, when people lose the ability to organize, when people lose the ability to express their opinions freely, it's a very dangerous, thing. And I think our two countries coming together sends a very powerful signal about the importance of democracy.
And then last, has it become more difficult to sell India in the US? Is it still an example of democratic development that the Global South seeks to emulate? The US sponsors, supports, sees as a solution for the Global South's developmental ambitions?
Oh, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about the promise of the relationship. Again, I tend to measure this not in 77 years, although if you go back and look at the progress in the Eisenhower and Kennedy administrations, it was actually quite significant. I measure this more in 24 and 25 years. So when I say the scope and scale of our progress is we are at the beginning, I really mean that. We have a lot of room to go. At the same time, I look at the contribution of the 4.5 million Americans of South Asian and Indian descent specifically. I mean, it's incredible. There's also a lot of folks who are new to the country, a lot of folks contributing at every level of society. In America, we should not think that every Indian American that comes to or every Indian that comes to the United States ends up as the CEO of a company. So many are working so hard to try to deliver a better life for their families and contributing to every level of society, from our military to all aspects of our government. So I think it's an exciting time for the U.S. India partnership. So if to answer your question directly, this is a partnership that people from both sides of the political aisle that I think across our country are quite enthused about.
Good. So before we open it up to a few questions, just one point on technology, maybe on climate.
Yeah.
You mentioned the initiative for critically emerging technology. You worked really hard on that.
Yeah.
ISET has developed, it's been announced, is in the making. I think you came early this year to work on it. But to what extent are the different perceptions of how the digital domain and technological cooperation should be regulated? I mean, on both sides, we had the NSAs in the lead. That shows already a security mindset in the lead a little bit. But on the Indian side, generally a little bit of more a statist approach, if you want. On the US side, a little bit of a private sector approach. Do you agree with that?
I don't know about that.
Has any initiative emerged out of ISET that sort of disproves the naysayers out there?
No, look, when I look at think about what's happening, what's happening is this incredible innovation and technological advancement. Governments, frankly, are trying to catch up to that. And there are huge benefits to that technological advancement. There are also risks if you don't have the rules of the road and the architecture in place to actually govern how that technology is used. So artificial intelligence is a great example. Incredibly powerful tool, but where is the global norm? Where is the global architecture for that? That is an area where the United States and India can actually play a really important role in helping to set the rules of the road. Quantum computing. When we look at critical minerals and the role that they play in industries that were just nascent only a few years ago, right? So we didn't have a mineral security partnership 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. It wasn't because critical minerals weren't important. Of course they were. But we weren't reliant on them the way we are today. I was talking about the electric vehicles that we're talking about. That is now what we talk about in society. We didn't have that kind of technology to roll out a decade ago or 15 years ago. So we have to actually protect and secure the components and the materials that go in those technologies. We can't allow one country to dominate a particular sector like that would compromise both of our securities. So it is about protecting the continued innovation and production. It is about how to use those technologies once they're deployed. I think about the progress that the Quad has made, for example, on some of these principles, talking about the use of technology to empower, to liberate, to educate, not to oppress, harass, or surveil, or to create disinformation. So we've got to really channel our efforts on the use of technology for good. I think we are doing that. Each country is going to come at this slightly differently, right, when it comes to regulation. But at the end of the day, we want some harmonization with the global community because these are technologies that affect all of us.
On climate, we have some work here at CSEP suggesting in Monte Ahluwalia, Utkarsh Patel, that India will require mobilization of investments to the tune of 2% of GDP by 2030 to match the gap of the transition. Huge. We know of the commitments made by many global North countries, the U.S. including, and that's just not coming through. A lot of disillusion here, if you want, etc. How can the U.S. be that climate partner for India's own transition?
Yeah.
Maybe adapt to India's pace, which is probably very different from the American pace.
Look, I think, we're no longer talking about the threat of climate change. We are living through the impacts of climate change, and it's very dangerous. It has a hugely destabilizing effect on the world. Right now, there's 125 million people displaced around the world on the move. Many of those are climate migrants who have had to kind of give up on crops, or they've had to move from coastal areas. The severe weather events are impacting life as we know it. So this is real and present. And as President Biden says, it's also a huge economic opportunity to move towards this green future together. I would take issue with people who say the global North hasn't developed on its commitment. I'd look, in this job, I have responsibility for foreign assistance in the budget. I've seen a $13 billion commitment from state and USAID and Treasury from just the US government alone each year for the past 5 or 6 years. I've seen the global community live up to that $100 billion target that was talked about many years ago at the climate conference. Question is, what comes next? The biggest investments are going to come from private sector players, from international financial institutions, and that is good. That is a good development. So I actually see a ton of investment coming in, and that is a promising thing. So I don't, I hear people talk about the divide. When you go talk to the industries, when you go talk to the innovators, all I see is incredible kind of enthusiasm and people moving at light speed to keep up with the demand for clean energy and new technologies. And governments have to be there. International financial institutions have to be there. And I think we are getting that, I think we are getting this right. Obviously, the pace at which we are moving, one of the breakthroughs of Paris was the fact that these would be individually defined contributions, of which we weren't going to mandate how a country would meet its particular target, but those targets are incredibly important. And so, again, we protected the sovereign rights of countries to figure out their own pathway, but the goals, I think, are shared goals about meeting those incredibly ambitious targets.
Thank you. We're racing against time. Maybe there's a few questions in here from the audience we can take with your permission.
Also, easy questions, right? Yeah.
We've covered the hard ground. So I see, few people there. Maybe one of our people at CSEP on tech, and then over there. Very briefly, quick question so we can take.
Deepak Maheshwari from CSEP. So on 30th August 2016, you had co-signed the U.S. India cooperation framework for cyber cooperation. And it would be nice, normally we know a little bit about what all has happened, but it would be nice to have some sort of something to put it on record. Thank you.
And I think over there, could you just briefly introduce yourself or something?
Hi, should I go? Yeah. So hi, this is Neha Mishra from CII, Confederation of Indian Industry. I just wanted to ask, since we discuss critical minerals and climate commitments, so I just wanted to ask that in light of the growing importance of critical minerals in securing clean energy transition and supply chain resilience, what steps are being considered by U.S. Department of State to deepen this India-US critical mineral partnership? Of course, you mentioned ISET and now Mineral Security Alliance is there, but how can both countries align their resources and expertise to foster joint research and development, collaboration, and most particularly and importantly, bring the private sector in this initiative? Thank you.
Last, Sriparna Pathak from Jindal University.
Thank you. Unfortunately, difficult question. My question I'll come straight to is, where is Tawahur Rana? He's Tawahur Rana, the co-accused in the Mumbai 2008 terror attacks. 3 days ago, a court in the US ruled that he can be sent to India to stand trial. This is 2024. Why are we discussing whether he can stand trial in India or not? What does this mean for the relationship? The attacks happened in 2008. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So you got a good mix there. Digital tech, critical minerals, India being one of the few developing countries in the CMS, and judicial issues that are pending.
Yeah. So look, on the, maybe I'll take the cyber and critical minerals questions together. And I think if the question is, like, what have we been doing since 2016? I would say this has been incredibly productive area for both the governments and for the private sector. We have a number of dialogues that have come up around cyber. But again, when we think about cyber cooperation, it is a security-focused effort, but it is also, again, setting the rules of the road. It is the developing the norms and our architecture, and I've actually seen important progress on that front. And it doesn't just happen bilaterally between us, it happens in multilateral forum as well. I looked at, again, just look at what we've done at the UN recently on the kind of use of artificial intelligence for good, basically, the declaration that was widely supported, and India was an important part of that. So I actually think government has an important role to play here, but again, the private sector also has a huge role to play because they are out developing the advances in the technology, and that's essential that we continue to support them. On the critical minerals front, again, our national security advisor was here recently, just a few months ago, had very good meetings with his NSA counterpart, and a real commitment to the ISET dialogue, but also the critical minerals partnership. And that India has a huge role to play in the diversification and establishment of, as I said in my remarks, potentially having a number of those critical minerals and the byproducts, the semiconductors and the chips being made here, being exported from here. The Micron investment, I think, is really important in that regard. So I think climate, advanced technologies, critical minerals, these are the big areas of cooperation in the years ahead. And we've seen that, and we've seen where our governments are focused. And I just think this is a very, very exciting area. I'm going to have to, on this question, Chris, you have the latest here. You want to?
I can talk off.
Yeah.
Sure. You want to take off?
Yeah.
Sorry. Chris, I was the spokesperson at the U.S. Embassy. Just very quickly on Rana's case, we're fortunate to have an extradition agreement with the government of India that allows for extradition between our countries. He did file, or his lawyers filed, an appeal that you saw was rejected by the courts. And so we can't speak to the decisions made by the courts, but the case continues to proceed in the legal system in the United States. And we do have that mechanism to be able to extradite to each country.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Good. We're running out of time. I wish we had another hour. We could go on with tough, easy, difficult questions, but I really appreciate, I think, the way you've been engaging and telling us. I think dismissing many way, we'll remember the myths about the U.S.-India relationship plateauing. You'll remember that narrative 10, 15 years ago. Ambassador Saran today has a phenomenal piece in Business Standard on the election in the U.S. and what is happening in the U.S. has such profound consequences for India's future foreign, economic, and security policy. So thanks for sharing that.
I think one thing I'd say, and look forward to reading your piece. I think, there was a feeling, I think, back in 2005, then 10, then 15, we had to have something big and dramatic every 2 to 3 years. There was civil nuclear, there was defense sales, and I think what we've realized is the big and dramatic is actually happening every day. And we've gotten somewhat accustomed to it. And it's happening between our people, it's happening between our industries, happens between the governments from time to time. But again, we've kind of regularized and normalized a relationship that can have such far-reaching consequences for the security and prosperity of the world. I love the President Eisenhower quote from 1959 talking about, young people of both of our countries getting together to deliver greater peace and security and prosperity for the world. And I think we are seeing the fruits of that today. And our political leaders have to remember how important that is, how important these immigrant stories are, how important America as a beacon of migration for people around the world has created this incredible melting pot, which is such a key component of the U.S.-India relationship. And that I'm really proud of that story. I'm really proud of the contributions of 4.5 million Indian Americans and all of those stories that really we don't tell often enough, which is why I wanted to pick 3 or 4 to talk about in those areas, to say we're not just doing things for each other. We're having an impact on cancer. We're having an impact on climate change. We're having an impact on critical minerals. And I didn't even talk about what we're doing on security and so many other areas that have this global impact. I didn't talk about what we're doing in Africa together on the development front, on vaccine development, on crop stabilization, on peacekeeping, on the training missions, and so many other areas. So I don't want to be, have such rose-colored glasses that everything is great. But I want the record to be clear about what people who have come before me have done, what people are still doing today, what the ambassador and his team do here each day to deliver results. And that's what we have to continue doing. The president likes to say foreign policy begins at home. And I think reminding people, both in the United States and India, what we've been doing is incredibly important.
Thank you for that. I'll pass the ball to Lavish to close it out.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Richard Verma, for your views and vision. They were most thought-provoking and insightful, and especially your thoughts on India and US working for the world was most refreshing and highly inspiring. I do hope we can host you again very soon.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our audience, both online and here, who have been able to take the time out for being here, and also to senior fellow Constantino Xavier for his moderation. I would also like to thank all the staff at the American Embassy, all the people involved in being able to organize this in such short notice, and for everyone at CSEP who have been able to put this together in such a short time and so seamlessly. Thank you. Secretary Verma has another appointment and needs to leave immediately. So after that, please do join us for tea. Thank you.